My mother-in-law brought a young woman to our house and said to me, "This is the one who will give me a grandchild." I was chopping onions in the kitchen when I heard my mother-in-law call from the living room, "Sweetie, come here a sec." I wiped my hands on my apron, still wearing the worn silver wedding band, and stepped out. Linda was sitting on the couch, a young woman, at least a decade younger than me, with sleek brown hair, flawless makeup, and ankle boots that looked like they had never touched a sidewalk. She stood up the moment she saw me, extended her hand, and smiled. "Hi, I'm Linda. I've heard a lot about you." Before I could react, my mother-in-law, seated comfortably in her favorite armchair, clutching Linda's hands like a declaration, said casually, "Linda's from Dallas. Her mother and I go way back. She's such a lovely girl." Everything around me seemed to freeze. I can't even remember how I responded. I just know I smiled politely, reflexively, and took a seat in the armchair across from them, the same one where I used to sit and do embroidery with her every Thanksgiving. But this time, I didn't feel warm. The fireplace was still crackling. The afternoon light filtered softly through the curtains. The scent of roasting turkey filled the air. And I, the only wife, was sitting across from the one chosen to replace me. My husband wasn't home. He'd gone to the store to pick up more whipped cream for the pumpkin pie. Part of me felt relieved he wasn't there to witness this. Another part of me felt like a background character in my own home, the home we had built together, piece by piece, from the rugs to the paint on the walls. And the thing that chilled me most wasn't Linda. It was a calm, almost indifferent look in my mother-in-law's eyes as she gazed at me, as if I were already gone. That night, my husband and I drove home in silence. The SUV glided past quiet rows of houses glowing with early Christmas lights. But inside the car, it was colder than the wind outside. I tried to speak a few times. Each time my lips parted, his grip on the steering wheel tightened, as if he were holding something fragile that might break. Finally, I asked, "Did you know she was coming?" He nodded, just barely. "Mom just said she was inviting someone she knew. I didn't think she'd actually do that." "I'm sorry." "You didn't think?" I let out a hollow laugh, one so unfamiliar it startled even me. She held that girl's hand in front of me, like she was introducing a fiancé. "And you didn't think?" He didn't respond, just kept driving, the streetlights cracking across the windshield like thin fractures of glass. When we got home, I didn't turn on the lights. I went straight to the kitchen, pulled out a leftover bottle of red wine from Thanksgiving, and poured a full glass. I'm not the type who drinks to forget, but that night I needed something to warm me up or to see clearly the anger churning inside me. He came in after, stood in the kitchen doorway as if waiting for a verdict. "What do you want me to do?" he asked softly, like every word could either melt me or break me. I looked at him, the man who'd been by my side for over a decade, who held my hand through every failed IVF cycle, every negative test, every time I woke up from a dream filled with a baby's cry that wasn't real. And now, his mother was out there looking for someone else to give him a child, as if I were a beautiful house with no kitchen. "I want you to stand with me," I said, "not stay silent, not pretend you don't see, not let your mother tell her story for us." He sat down at the dining table, his hands trembling, and then he said something I never expected. "If she doesn't change, we'll have to leave. Just us. No her. No Dallas. Not even the holidays this year. Just us." I didn't know how to feel when he said that. Part of me wanted to cry because he finally chose to stand by me, but another part of me felt bitter. Why did I have to choose between my dignity and his family? I never asked him to give up his mother, but I also couldn't accept being treated like something disposable just because my body didn't function the way others expected it to. 3 days later, my mother-in-law called. Her voice was gentler than usual, as if the weekend had never happened. "Linda really likes you, you know. She said you were very polite. I'm also glad you kept your composure." Composure? I gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. All I could see was the image of her in the living room, her hand resting on Linda's, those eyes looking at me like a judge delivering a sentence. I don't even remember what I said during that call, only that it ended with me hanging up before she could say, "Happy holidays." That evening, he came home late. He walked in with takeout and a white envelope. "It's a Christmas invitation from Mom," he said, placing it on the table without opening it. "She still wants us to come, maybe to revisit things." I didn't touch the envelope. I just looked at him and asked, "What if I don't go?" He sighed, so long and deep, I thought my heart might stop in the silence. "Then I won't go either." The next morning, I found him in the study, typing something on his laptop. He closed it as soon as I walked in. Before, I wouldn't have thought much of it. But today, my heart was already tangled in doubt. "What are you writing?" I asked. He hesitated, then opened it again. It was an email addressed to Linda. I never thought I'd have to read an email between my husband and another woman, especially one he wrote right in front of me, with no attempt to hide it. He wasn't cheating. I knew that, but the words on the screen left me hollow in a very different way. "Linda, I appreciate your kindness, but I need to be honest. My loyalty belongs to my wife. Whatever expectations were placed on you by my mother, I'm sorry you were put in that position." I read and reread that last part. My loyalty belongs to my wife. A part of me felt relief, but I couldn't help asking myself, why did it need to be written down, like some formal declaration? Why did it have to be sent to someone else, instead of said directly to his mother? He turned to look at me, eyes bracing for judgment. I didn't scream, didn't throw anything, didn't cry. I just asked, "You think your mom ever saw what I went through? All those times I walked out of the clinic, still bleeding into a pad, smiling at her like everything was fine? The nights I stayed awake counting ovulation days, swallowing pills, tracking numbers, just to be met with a blank pregnancy test." He was silent, not because he didn't understand, but because he didn't know how to respond without breaking something further. We didn't eat dinner that night. I lay on the sofa, the glow from the Christmas tree casting flickering shadows across the ceiling, like questions that had no answers. He stayed in the other room, door closed, not out of anger, but because we both knew any words now might hurt more than they could heal. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual. Outside, snow had begun to fall, light and thin, settling over the white picket fence like a cold blanket. In the kitchen, the coffee pot was still full, but stone cold. I poured myself a cup and stood by the window. Linda, was never the problem. His mother was the one rewriting the story, and I was beginning to understand. If I didn't speak up, I would disappear from my own life. I spent the entire morning folding each of my sweaters, not because I was leaving, but to remind myself that I still existed. Each sweater, each pair of socks, every little object, they weren't just clothes. They were evidence. Proof of a woman who had lived through 1,000 days of hope and heartbreak. I wasn't walking away, but I also wasn't letting anyone else decide where I belonged ever again. When he woke up, I was sitting at the dining table, holding my gray notebook, the one where I had written every appointment, every hormone level, every IVF injection schedule, and all the times I had to stop treatment because my body was too weak. I slid it across the table to him. "I need you to read this. Every page." He didn't say a word, but I saw his hands tremble slightly as he opened it. I stood up and walked to the kitchen, rinsed a glass, not because I needed to, but because I didn't want to see his face while he read. I don't know how long he spent with it, but when he finally came into the kitchen, he wrapped his arms around me from behind. His hold wasn't strong, wasn't desperate, just silent, heavy with the weight of the 10 years we'd shared. He whispered, "My mother won't stop, but I will stop her." 2 days later, we went to Dallas, not for Christmas, but for a conversation. I asked to speak to my mother-in-law alone. In the kitchen where she once taught me how to bake my first pie, I sat across from her, my gaze steady, unapologetic. I am his wife, and if you cannot accept that, We will no longer be here. No holidays, no phone calls, nothing. She was silent for a long time. I thought she might explode, but she didn't. She simply turned away, poured herself a cup of tea, and said, in a voice barely above a whisper, "You can give me a grandchild, but you gave me a better version of my son." I didn't know if that was a compliment or her way of surrendering, but I knew that after those words, something between us had closed. Not love, but control. Since that conversation in Dallas, we no longer visited my mother-in-law during the holidays. There was no official announcement, no dramatic ending. The invitations simply stopped coming. The phone calls grew fewer and farther between. No one ever apologized. No one said, "I was wrong." But I knew the boundary had been drawn. Clear, undeniable. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty about it. We returned to Houston like people emerging from a long stretch of low-pressure weather. The air around us felt lighter. Our dinners were no longer weighed down by silence. We resumed our evening walks, not saying much, just holding hands as we strolled through rain-dampened streets under golden lamplight. One night, he turned to me in the middle of a quiet block and said, "Feels like we're starting over." I nodded. Some wounds don't need to be healed completely, just not press on every day. And that's enough to begin again. 3 months later, on a morning filled with boredom and no expectation whatsoever, I took a pregnancy test I lost count to age time. I left it on the bathroom sink and forgot about it. It wasn't until the washing machine chimed that I walked past it again and glanced down. 2 red lines. Not faint, clear, defiant, like a slap in the face of time, a rebuttal to 10 years of being called useless. I didn't cry. I sank down onto the floor, back against the washing machine, hands over a belly that had yet to show anything. There was no dramatic soundtrack, no cinematic swell of emotion, just one thought ringing in my head. My body didn't betray me. I told my husband with a sticky note on the fridge, "Looks like we're not going to be sleeping in for the next 18 years. He read it, didn't say a word. He simply walked over and held me for a long time. This time, there was no space between our bodies. No unasked questions. No silence to endure. Just trust. Simple. Human. Pregnancy didn't make me feel more complete. I didn't suddenly become a whole woman because I could now carry a child. But it gave me something I never thought I'd have. A sense that, even if my body hadn't always followed the plan, my heart had always been right. My mother-in-law found out through my husband. She didn't call, didn't send flowers, just a Christmas card a few weeks later. Inside it, 3 simple words: "Take care of both." I read it in silence, then tucked it away. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel touched. Our relationship was like a book closed, not torn out, but no longer one I needed to reread. Right now, I'm in my 2nd trimester. I'm still tired, still nauseous, still nervous about every blood test, but I'm no longer afraid of myself. I'm not afraid of anyone's gaze. And more importantly, I no longer feel like I have to hold on to my husband because he never left. If you ask me the biggest lesson I've learned from all of this, it would be this. Sometimes you have to give yourself permission to stop being the one who pleases everyone and start being the one who lives truthfully for yourself. This story isn't just about having a child after years of trying. It's, at its core, the journey of a woman reclaiming her voice in her own life, in both society and her own family. She was seen as incomplete for not being able to bear children, but instead of settling into the background, she chose to rise, to draw boundaries, to protect her love, her dignity, and her worth. The child is a miracle, but more importantly, she didn't lose herself in the process of trying to please others, and that is the real victory. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this deeply personal and emotional story. If you've ever found yourself in a similar situation, facing pressure from family, from society, or feeling like you're not enough simply because you didn't follow traditional expectations, Don't hesitate to share your thoughts in the comments. And if you have a personal story of your own to tell, I'm always here to listen. If this story resonated with something in your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss future moments of reflection and connection. Your support means the world to me. It's what keeps me telling the truth, living honestly, and connecting with others through the most human parts of who we are.